Good morning, everyone. We are about to start the NATO Defense Ministerial meeting tomorrow and previewed this afternoon by the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. So we're going to start off today with a statement from the Secretary General, followed with your questions.
Thank you and good morning. NATO defense ministers are meeting in Brussels to lay the ground for the summit in The Hague and also take key decisions to enhance our deterrence and defense. We will also address our continued support for Ukraine and the urgent need for peace. The world is becoming more dangerous. There's Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, the threat of terrorism, and intense global competition. We will continue to protect our people and our way of life. So we must make NATO a stronger, fairer, and more lethal alliance. At this ministerial, we are going to take a huge leap forward. We will strengthen our deterrence and defense by agreeing ambitious new capability targets. These targets set out what forces and concrete capabilities the allies need to provide to strengthen our deterrence and defense. Air and missile defense, long-range weapons, logistics, large land maneuver formations are among our top priorities. We need more resources, forces, and capabilities so that we are prepared to face any threat and to implement our collective defense plans in full. To deliver on our new targets, it's clear that we will need significantly higher defense spending. That underpins everything. European allies and Canada have been stepping up. And I expect that most, if not all allies, will reach the initial aim of spending 2% of GDP on defense this year. Many have invested or have plans to invest much, much more. But we have to go further and we have to go faster. So we will discuss the urgent need to increase defense spending for our core military requirements and for defense-related investments, including infrastructure and resilience. A new defense investment plan will be at the heart of the NATO summit in The Hague. And an essential part of investing more is ensuring there is supply to meet our increased demand. So we will work to increase defense production. This is needed so that our militaries have the critical capabilities they need. This is good for our security and, by the way, also good for our economies. Defense spending keeps us safe, but it also creates jobs across the alliance. We will also address NATO's continued support for Ukraine and the need to bring an end to this terrible war. Later today, NATO allies, partners and Ukraine will take part in a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, chaired by Germany and the United Kingdom. This will focus on continued support for Ukraine as it fights back against Russian aggression. And we fully support President Trump's efforts to stop the bloodshed with a just and lasting peace. NATO's long-term support to Ukraine is not about prolonging the war. It is about ensuring Ukraine can defend itself now and prevent any future aggression. Allies will also meet in the NATO-Ukraine Council tomorrow with Minister Umerov and EU High Representative Kallas. Minister Umerov will give an update on the battlefield and offer Ukraine's assessment on the search for peace. We are at a pivotal moment for our security. Make no mistake, NATO is strong today and we will become even stronger. Strong defenses send a clear message. No one should ever think of attacking us. Finally, nuclear deterrence is the cornerstone of alliance security. And tomorrow this ministerial will conclude with a regular meeting of the Nuclear Planning Group. The fundamental purpose of NATO's nuclear capability is to preserve peace, prevent coercion, and deter aggression. And with that, I'm ready to take your questions.
All right, we'll start with the gentleman in the fourth row with the glasses.
Thank you. Sven-Christian Schulz, Redaktionsnetzwerk Deutschland, German Newspaper Network, R&D. My first question is about the defense capability target. So how satisfied are you with the fulfillment of the current capability targets, and could the new higher targets act like, let's say, as a wake-up call for allies who have not fulfilled the current ones? And secondly...
Can I do this question by question? So first on the first question, well, obviously there is still a lot to be done on the current capability targets. That's basically implicit in your question, and I couldn't agree more. And we need to do much, much more than what was basically encompassed in the current capability target. So that means that this week is so important, because we will agree. And that means that we will assess the gaps we have in our collective defense to be able not only today to protect ourselves against any Russian aggression, the Chinese build-up, look what is happening between China, North Korea, Iran and Russia, etc., etc. But also to do this in the future, that we are able to defend ourselves, not only now, today, but also in 3 to 5 years. Your second question.
Thank you. Regarding the peace negotiations with Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul, after this negotiations, peace does not seem any closer today. So with this in mind, are you convinced that peace is possible through negotiations with Putin, or is he just gambling?
What I think is we really have to commend is the fact that President Trump broke the deadlock. Because till January this year, there were no direct conversations ongoing between the US and Russia. And I think it was important that Trump did this. Of course, this is not easy. And we have to make sure that we bring Ukraine to a lasting and durable peace. This is exactly what the US wants, what all the allies want, of course, what Ukraine wants. So Putin should never, ever try this again. And that means we have to test him, we have to sit down with him, or at least with his team, discuss, etc. And it is the US taking the lead on this, and I'm really glad that they do that.
All right, second row, Agence France Presse.
Hello, Secretary General.
Good morning.
Couple of related questions. You told President Zelensky in Vilnius that Ukraine is a priority at the NATO summit, but it seems there will be no progress on Ukraine's desire to join the alliance, and there will be no commitment from allies, like in Washington, of a broad support package for Ukraine. So isn't the priority on Ukraine at the Hague summit to avoid upsetting Donald Trump? And
can I, on your first question, and then we come back to you, because otherwise I have to make notes. On your first question, the decision in Washington to present to the Ukrainians an irreversible path of Ukraine into NATO still stands today. There is no change. By the way, it was never promised to Ukraine that potential NATO membership would be part of a peace deal or a ceasefire. But that long-term commitment, that irreversible path is there, and we are building the bridge through the command in Wiesbaden, what we are doing together with Ukraine in Poland, capturing all the lessons, the ongoing support for Ukraine on a day-to-day basis. And on your second question, the first 3 months of this year, this is not news, I mentioned this before, allies have pledged 20 billion euros again for Ukraine in terms of military support, compared to the 50 billion last year, full year. On the first 3 months of this year, again, 20 billion, and more will come in. We will have the UDCG today, the Ukraine Defense Contract Group, and I'm absolutely confident and have reason to believe that more commitments will be made today. So that's ongoing. So there is no change there, because we are all united, including the United States, Canada, and all European allies, that we have to make sure that Ukraine can sustain in the fight, and that we can bring this terrible conflict, this Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, to a durable and lasting end.
you say that you're all committed, but for the first time since this format started, the US Defense Secretary is going to skip the contact group. What does that say about US commitment to Ukraine? And haven't they gone completely AWOL on supporting Ukraine?
This is Pete Hegseth's second visit to Brussels since he became Defense Secretary, Secretary of State for Defense of the United States, which happened in January. He will be here for the second time this year, participating in the meeting tomorrow. The US will be present today in the UDCG. The US is completely committed to NATO, completely committed to our joint endeavors when it comes to Ukraine. There's no reason to doubt that. And whether someone is participating, yes or no, in each meeting, let's not forget, these meetings take place most of the times in Europe, so it will not always be possible for US officials to participate in every meeting.
All right, coming to this side of the room. Fourth row, orange jacket.
Thank you so much, Alexandra Ponam
Morning.
with DW. I was wondering about Ukraine's role at the NATO summit. As we understand, Ukraine is invited,
Yes.
but there is at the moment, at least apparently, no meeting of NATO-Ukraine Council planned at the leaders level. So for you personally, as Secretary General, how important it is for you, for President Zelensky, to play a big role during this summit, and also how important it is for you, condemnation of Russia and also the aid for Ukraine to be prominently featured in the summit's communique?
Indeed, I invited Ukraine to the summit. We will, as soon as possible, bring out the program with more details. When it comes to Ukraine, NATO, we will have, and this is very important today with the defense ministers, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, we will have a NATO-Ukraine Council tomorrow. And we will continue having these meetings and making sure that we coordinate to the max. And the summit will play a role there, absolutely. Again, I invited Ukraine and we will bring out the program in due course. You will see what happens, yes.
All right, just in front of her in the white.
Roxolana Lisovska, Public Broadcasting Company of Ukraine. We are waiting for the NATO summit, and could you please confirm whether it is true that the NATO summit communique will be shortened and will not include words Ukraine and Russia? If yes, why? And what can we expect to see in this communique?
Well, of course, we are still working with allies and through the North Atlantic Council on the communique. I think this summit really should concentrate on a few issues. Really concentrate. One is a huge increase in defense spending to make sure that we can keep ourselves safe, not only now but also in the future. Related to that, making sure that we really that our defense industries will put in extra production lines, extra shifts. For that, they need to know that we are spending more. They need to know what the capability targets are. And the capability targets we will decide on tomorrow. And on the spending, we will decide at the summit. And that combination will make it better, easier for defense industries to take their necessary commercial decisions. Not to increase prices, but to increase the production lines, to increase the shifts, so that our great and beautiful defense industries in the US, in Europe and Canada will produce much, much more. And of course, Ukraine will be discussed and on the agenda at the summit. There's no doubt.
All right, the gentleman in the gray jacket and glasses.
Dmitry Shkuko, National News Agency of Ukraine. Thank you so much. Do you expect the ministers and later on the summit, the allies will make a contribution, fixed contribution for assisting Ukraine, like it was 40 billions of euro last year? Do you expect that will be fixed for next year and next years, let me say so? And the second question, if I may, do you expect Ukrainian side will inform you on the strikes on the strategic aviation and on the blow up of the Kerch breach, details and what kind of assessment NATO have, it will influence the overall security situation? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, on your first question, it's even better. We don't have to wait till the summit, because as we speak, over the first 3 months of this year, NATO allies have again pledged 20 billion to Ukraine. And again, this compares to the, in total, 50 billion, which was pledged last year, from which 60% came from the United States allies, so Canada and the European allies. 59, 60%, so almost 60% of that 50 billion. These first 3 months of this year, in total already 20 billion pledged, and there will be, I'm absolutely convinced, much more. And today's Ukraine Defense Contract Group will be helpful here. So I think that is important. And when it comes, of course, to the events last Sunday, clearly that's for Ukraine. And let's not forget that the capabilities they hit were the capabilities the Russians were using to attack innocent people, going about their daily lives in Ukrainian cities and communities. I think we really should take note of that.
Okay, fourth row center.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary General. How unfortunate is it that the Dutch government has collapsed 3 weeks before the summit? And how important it is, you think, that Dutch Parliament will allow the caretaker government to decide on the new investment plan? And just for the record, you're staying here, right? Or
yes.
Is duty calling?
I'm staying here, obviously I should not comment about Dutch politics, but I'm really absolutely positively convinced that at the summit with the 32 we will come to an agreement when it comes to this really big increase in defense spending, in defense industrial production, keeping the support for Ukraine going. I'm absolutely convinced.
All right, and then coming to the second row here in the center.
Secretary General, I have rather two questions. The first one is about external politics and the other one about internal politics. So about the external. The United States plan to withdraw the troops from Europe. How would Russia and China and the other countries that are not so friendly to NATO evaluate that? And the
can I do it question by question? So on your, and then you can then ask the second question if the gentleman is able to sustain that position.
Thank you.
Yeah. On the first question, there are no plans at the moment for the US to withdraw troops. What we do know is that one, the US is completely committed to NATO. They expect European and Canadian allies to spend much more because why would they spend X percentage on defense and then the rest of the alliance a lower percentage? So we have to increase spending, first of all, because we have to reach all those capability targets and close the gaps we still have to make sure that we can also fight the Russians if they try to attack us in 3 to 5 years, but also to equalize with the United States. And I think that is only fair. And then we know that the United States, of course, Europe, NATO is extremely important because for a safe United States homeland, you need a safe Atlantic, you need a safe Arctic, and you need security in Europe. This is all three crucial for the United States. But at the same time, we know the United States also has to, because they are so big and so powerful, have to concentrate on other theaters in the world, like the Middle East and of course the Indo-Pacific. So pivoting somewhat more to these areas is only logical. And what we have to make sure is that there will be no gaps in our capabilities, etc., etc. And I'm absolutely convinced that is exactly the way we will go ahead on this.
Well, it was the ambassador of the United States to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, who announced this plans to withdraw. So at the moment, I see a contradiction between your words and his words.
No, because we speak every week, and I know exactly what he said. And what he said is, exactly as I said, we have to pivot more towards other theaters, one, and we will make sure that there will be no capability gaps in Europe.
And the second question, internal, you said that the NATO plan to increase defense spending. And do you expect the European member states to cut their social spending, like healthcare, like pensions and unemployment payments, stuff like that, in order to increase budget spending on defense issues?
Well, first of all, let's agree why it is necessary to spend so much more. That is because the Russian threat is there for the long term, and the Russians, as we speak, are reconstituting themselves at a rapid pace. I mentioned this number before, the fact that with only having only a 2 trillion economy, compared to a 50 trillion economy for NATO, 25 times bigger, they producing 4 times more in terms of ammunition than the whole of NATO is doing. They produce in 3 months what the whole of NATO is producing in a year, whilst they are only 2 trillion compared to our 50 trillion, so 25 times smaller than NATO. So that means that we really have to ramp up our defense spending. Munition, priority number 1, but also all the elements I mentioned, including command and control, maneuverable land formations, long-range missiles, air defense systems, etc., etc., to keep ourselves safe. Then, of course, if that means for countries increased defense spending, you will come to the political question where to get it from. And then it's up to the politicians and the national consensus how to do this. And there are generally 3 areas. You can increase taxation, you can increase the debt, or you can try to find savings elsewhere. But this is up to national politicians, not up to me. I only need to make sure that collectively we have what we need to prevent us from taking out the Russian language courses.
Thank you.
All right, and just next to him in the second row.
Hi, thank you, Secretary General. I'm Sam Brazil from the independent Russian outlet Meduza. I have 2 questions about the Baltic region. NATO countries are already challenged today in the Baltic region with sabotage attacks regularly and Russia's shadow fleet, among other things. So first question, is NATO prepared for a potential Russian hardcore attack in the Baltic region?
Well, first of all, we are always prepared for every eventuality, and Vladimir Putin should know that if he would try, that our reaction will be devastating, and he knows. What we have to make sure of is that it is not only devastating today, but that it will also be devastating and very effective in 3, 5, 7 years from now, and that's why we have to spend more. When it comes to the Baltic region, but this is also true for the Black Sea and for other NATO areas, there is the constant threat of attacks on our critical undersea infrastructure. And that's why we have set up in MARCOM, the Maritime Command in the UK, this specialized center when it comes to our undersea critical infrastructure. That is why Baltic Sentry, which is an activity which was launched under the auspices of General Cavoli, our Supreme Allied Commander, starting on the 5th of January this year, in reaction to what happened when it came to the sea cables between Estonia and Finland. So we are reacting, we are making sure that we keep the Baltic region safe, all the other seas and airspace of NATO territory, and particularly also focusing on our critical undersea infrastructure.
So my second question was going to be about willingness of NATO to protect, for example, a small Baltic city like Narva. But you kind of addressed that, but I want to ask about the resources. Are the resources really there? Is infrastructure there?
I can assure you that we will defend every inch of NATO territory. That Article 5, an attack on one, is an attack on all, is ironclad. And that if anyone, be it Putin or somebody else, would think it's not there, it is there, and they will face the consequences if they try anything.
All right, 4th row, gentleman with the glasses.
Good morning, Secretary General.
Good morning.
From NTV Turkey. I have 2 questions, but I'll ask one by one. I get the message,
Yeah, you get the drill.
Exactly. So, would it be wrong to frame the discussion in Den Haag, in La Haye, about, on the one hand, involving European countries in increasing their defense expenditure to 5% and committed to Article 3, versus a clear, enduring also commitment from the US that they are faithful to Article 5?
On this issue, because this is raised many times, I also answered the question last Monday in Vilnius, and I'm so happy that you asked the question again. The United States is totally committed to NATO, completely committed to Article 5. Not only because, for historical reasons, not to repeat the mistake after the First World War, when they retreated from the European continent, but also for practical reasons, because to defend the US homeland, they need a secure Atlantic, a secure Arctic, and a secure Europe. And I told my European colleagues here, when they asked me the same question, Mark, is the US still completely committed to NATO? I said, you might want to turn on your television once in a while and listen to President Trump when he meets with the French president, when he meets with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, when he meets with the Prime Minister of Italy. I had the honor to visit the American president in March, and in all those cases, and many other instances, they have made totally clear their commitment to Article 5, their commitment to NATO, etc., etc. So maybe we should now start stopping asking the US to do this, and now we will ask for the next half year for the Dutch or the Estonians to commit to Article 5 in NATO, and then first half next year we will move to Spain and France, and we'll do this part of NATO by part of NATO, because it is not fair to constantly ask, and I'm not arguing with you, but through you with some of my European colleagues, to constantly question that. However, this comes with an expectation, and the expectation is that on the European side of NATO and the Canadian side of NATO, if we think that we can keep ourselves safe, sticking with the 2%, forget it. Yes, the next 3 to 5 years, but then we are in great difficulty, and the US rightly expects us to spend much more to defend ourselves with their help, but also to equalize, which is only fair, with what the US is spending on defense.
And the second question is with regard to the warfighting readiness. It's a topic that you also raised in P9, and it's, I guess, the topic today. But is there enough resources and political will to within the alliance to on that very matter, bearing in mind that this 1 billion citizen adopted the Feyenoord motto, we don't want words, but we want deeds?
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what we have. NATO is the most powerful defense alliance in world history. It's even more powerful than the Roman Empire. And more powerful than the Napoleon Empire. We are the most powerful defense alliance in world history. But the defense alliance needs maintenance and needs investment. And that's exactly why in NATO we have this whole system, the NATO defense planning process, now leading to an agreement on the capability targets. And that means that we will have exact clarity on where are we and where should we be if we want to be able to defend ourselves not only today, but also in 3, 5, 7 years. Listen to the German chief of defense, who said this week on the record that within 4 or 5 years the Russians might be able to attack us. Well, I and all my colleagues want to prevent that because we want to stay free. We value our way of life, and we don't want any form of Russian dominance over NATO territory.
All right, just in front of him, Reuters.
Andrew Gray from Reuters. Secretary General, you said that Ukraine is invited to the summit at The Hague. When you say Ukraine, do you mean specifically President Zelensky? And is he invited to the summit itself? Would there be a NATO-Ukraine Council, or just to the dinner? And if that's the case, isn't that a diplomatic downgrade on previous summits?
As I said to your colleague, we will publish the program in due course.
All right, coming here, fourth row, the woman in the peach jacket.
Thank you, Binna Chung with South Korean news agency Yonhap. The newly elected South Korean president took office today.
Yes.
So what would be your message to him? And in this regard, are you now in a position to officially announce the invitation of IP4 countries to the Hague Summit? Thank you.
Well, again, on the program, we will publish that in due course. But of course, there is a tradition of the IP4 participating in NATO meetings. And personally, I very much look forward to working with the new Korean president, and I wish him luck and well in his important endeavors. It's not an easy job because there is so much at stake, of course, in the Indo-Pacific, in Korea, but also in his relations, the very important relations Korea has with the rest of the world. So I'm there to help, to support, and to build that relationship, and I really look forward to doing that. And I wish him every success.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more questions. The woman here in the front.
Hi, thank you. Ksenia Polska, Deutsche Welle, Ukrainian and Russian. I have a question on the spiderweb operation carried out by Ukrainian armed forces in Russia. It's a couple of questions, so maybe, yeah, we know the drill. Has the attack changed the perception of what Ukraine's and Russia's armies are capable of? And has it changed the balance of power in a way that could actually affect the negotiations?
I think there's good reason for me not to comment on every everything happening at the battlefield. You know, Ukraine has our full support. All allies want Ukraine to be in the best possible position in the peace talks. We want to bring this conflict to a durable end. And when it comes to a specific operation last Sunday, as I mentioned to one of your colleagues, clearly what they targeted is Russia's capability to hit out, to target with missiles and other means innocent Ukrainian civilians in cities, in communities all over Ukraine. And I clearly take note of that. But let me not comment on every step and then assess what that means for the standing and the war, etc., because that's not always helpful.
Question because
of course,
my newsroom is expecting.
I cannot let you go without asking the question.
But you said you don't want to go into details. Still, I have to. Was Ukraine using intelligence of NATO allies for that Pavutina spiderweb operation?
As I said on your previous question, it's tradition for us to not comment on every Ukrainian operation or every Russian operation. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't comment on it. And in this case, my comment is clearly on the targets of the Ukrainian operation. And these are Russian capabilities they use to do these indiscriminate, unprovoked attacks on innocent Ukrainian civilians, cities, etc. And that's terrible that they do this. And I take note of the fact that Ukraine was targeting those capabilities.
All right. And final question to the gentleman just behind her.
Thank you. Sergei Sidorenko, European Pravda, Ukraine. I'd like to ask you about your vision and allies' vision on distribution of this, let's say, 5% or what you would finally define. Ukraine is getting support, Ukrainian armed forces are getting support from the alliance. Do you see that this support can be accounted as part of hard security expenses, or it could be only a kind of defense-related expenses, or it can be both, or it's still under discussion? And anyway, would Ukraine account for taking part in this high investment, which can amount up to 5%? Thank you.
First of all, it would be strange and not wise if in NATO we would take decisions on spending more and then doing it in such a way that it would somehow work against Ukraine getting what it needs going forward to stay in the fight and be in the best possible position in the peace talks. So we will make sure that we will design the new investment plan in such a way that it will not impact the way our allies are working with Ukraine to make sure that you have what you need to stay in the fight.
All right. Thank you all so much. We will see you back here tomorrow.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.